Welcome to the Madison Miller Podcast Special Edition Series, where I go over every NFL team's offseason preview and prediction. This is the 13th of 32 shows, and this is going to be the Houston Texans. The Texans, obviously, coming off a great year. They found themselves a franchise quarterback, a coach, and they really put themselves in a good position to be successful for years to come. So you guys know the drill by now. Free agents to be, team needs, franchise tag candidate, trade candidate, release candidate, extension candidate, draft fit, free agent fit, and a bold prediction. And like I said at the top, the Texans are up. All right, so the Texans have a lot of free agents to be. Noah Brown, Dalton Schultz, Devin Singletary, Jerry Hughes, Sheldon Rankins, Jonathan Grenard, Derek Barnett, Blake Cashman, Denzel Perryman, Steven Nelson, Tavier Thomas, Cameron Johnston, Kyami Fairbairn. That's a lot. And Desmond King, their punt returner, too. So team needs wide receiver, tight end, running back, defensive tackle, defensive end, inside linebacker, outside linebacker, quarterback, kicker, punter. The Texans do have a lot of needs, and in spite of that, they won their division. Franchise tag candidate, I'm going to say Dalton Schultz. Dalton Schultz, a really good season for the Texans as a tight end coming over from the Cowboys. Was one of C.J. Stroud's favorite targets down the stretch. And I believe that he is the most likely candidate to get the tag on this team. Trade candidate, I'm going to say Davis Mills, the backup quarterback. Backup quarterbacks have been popular in terms of trade candidates. But the case for Davis Mills is that he wasn't terrible as a backup quarterback. And if someone needs an upgrade at that position, like the Jets, like Davis Mills would be better than what the Jets had. Or somebody, trying to think of other teams that could use a competent backup quarterback. The Jets are the one that comes to mind. Maybe New England if they move on from Bailey Zappi. But there are some teams that could use the services of Davis Mills as a backup quarterback. Maybe the Colts if they don't re-sign Gardner Minshew, which we'll get to the Colts in the next podcast. Release candidate, Jimmy Ward, the safety. He got hurt this past year as a big free agent signing that came over from the Niners a couple years ago. And his contract status, 2-year deal last year, so he's in a contract year going into next year. So I wouldn't be shocked if he was cut. He's 32 years old, so age is getting up there. So I can see Jimmy Ward being a release candidate on this team. Extension candidate, Nico Collins. He put together a really good career year catching the ball from C.J. Stroud. He pretty much was an anytime touchdown machine last year, and I would not be shocked if they give him a nice little contract extension. And Nico Collins is still really young. He was only drafted in 2021. Draft fit, Jerzon Newton, the defensive lineman out of Illinois. Versatile player. He could play anywhere on the D-line. I had him mocked to the Texans in my first 2 mock drafts. There are other guys that could be fits. Terron Arnold and Columbia Kinstry of Alabama. Braylon Trice. Quinion Mitchell, Byron Murphy, Chris Braswell, Ennis Rackestaw, Darius Robinson, Leonard Taylor, Jatavion Sanders if they lose Dalton Schultz, Roman Wilson out of Michigan, a wideout, Adonai Mitchell. So there's many ways they could go with for the draft. But Newton makes a ton of sense. Xavier Legette, if you're talking about later rounds, makes some sense. Tyler Nubin, TJ Tampa, Jonah Ellis, Jonathan Brooks could be a dark horse because if they lose Singletary as a free agent and excuse me, they really don't trust Damian Peterson. They like him as more of a special teams guy. Jonathan Brooks would be a really interesting choice there. Ladd McConkey out of Georgia to wideout. Chop Robinson out of Penn State. Edgar Cooper out of A&M. So, yeah, the Texans, a lot of these guys would be great fits with the team. Free agent fit. Leonard Williams, yet another defensive tackle. But yeah, you could play him at the end or a tackle, say with Jerson Newton. But like I said, they lose a lot of guys up there. Sheldon Rankins, Jonathan Grenard, both free agents. Dark Barnett, too. And Malik Collins isn't terrible, but Leonard Williams is a good player. I think that would be a really good fit. That was a really terrible trade by Seattle, by the way. They didn't even make the postseason, and the Giants took advantage of Seattle and saw an opportunity of a trade, and now they're going to get a good second rounder out of it. So that's a story for the Giants podcast, but I do think Leonard Williams on Houston would be a good fit from a free agent standpoint. You could play him at either end or at tackle, and say if you draft Jerson Newton, you could play him at either position as well. So from a versatility standpoint, I think Leonard Williams will be a good free agent fit for the Texans. Other free agent fits that could potentially happen. Antoine Winfield Jr. So the Bucs have a big decision: Baker or Antoine Winfield or Mike Evans for franchise tag. So they have a decision to make. Jalen Johnson if the Bears don't franchise tag him. Same for L'Jarius Sneed. Michael Pittman. There's a lot of guys that would fit there. Mike Evans. I mean, they do need a real WR1 because I don't look at Nico Collins as that. Tank Dell could be that, though. I mean, he was awesome before he got hurt. And then Robert Woods is a veteran that's been in big games before with the Rams, and then he was on the Titans last year. So he's there now. So maybe wide receiver really isn't that big of a need. Kendall Fuller. Bryce Huff would be a good fit. DJ Reader. Kyle Duggar might be franchise tag. We'll save that for New England. Carmen Curl. There's a lot of guys that would fit. Chidobe Awuzie. Chase Young, if they want to go that route. I mean, they could go for one of those running backs if they become available, like Saquon Barkley or Josh Jacobs or Derrick Henry. If they could go one of those ways, that would be an upgrade over Singletary for sure, who's going to be a free agent anyway. So one of those big three could go on to Houston. Stephon Gilmore. But my bold prediction for the Texans, I think they're going to sign a big free agent, and a big free agent that is going to be coming from their own division in Jacksonville. I think they're going to sign Calvin Ridley away from the Jaguars for $72. They do need that real WR1. To me, Robert Woods could be a potential release or trade candidate if they pull this off. Or he could be the number 4 receiver and they lose Noah Brown in free agency. And they also have John Mechie, too, who really hasn't seen the field. So, Calvin Ridley, a surprise free agent sign. I think he goes to Houston, and they load up at that position. Robert Woods becomes a backup. We don't know if Tank Dell's going to look as good in September. Coming off that injury. So I'm going to say 4 for 72, Calvin Ridley to the Houston Texans as a monster free agent signing. Okay, potential futures for the Houston Texans. They should be favored to win their division. They won the division this past year. They should be favored again. CJ Stroud is like 11-1 for MVP. It's better MVP odds than Trevor Lawrence, who was hyped up to be the next Peyton Manning, and he hasn't even been close to the next Peyton Manning, Trevor Lawrence. CJ Stroud came on the scenes and wowed everybody. But my big fear for the Texans is that they're next year's Giants. Or they're the Giants of this season. Like, disappointing year. We hyped up the coach. Quarterback takes a step back. But the difference is that CJ Stroud is more upside than Daniel Jones ever will. And although Dayball's a better coach than DeMeco Ryans, I think. But it's close. I think DeMeco's awesome too. That's not that Dayball isn't, but I think DeMeco's really good and was robbed of the Coach of the Year award. But my big fear is that they could be a disappointment in 2024. But the better comp would be the Washington Redskins in 2013 in year 2 of RG3. They were disappointing that year. And I think they had to, they didn't even have their own pick. I think the Rams had their pick because of the RG3 trade, but I remember the year after RG3's rookie year, they were a disappointment and they didn't win the NFC East. So maybe they are the 2013 Redskins, but maybe not. But they'll probably be favored to win the division, probably like plus 120, plus 130, that type of range. But the Jaguars are probably going to be like plus 180 or maybe 2-1. And then it'll be the Colts right there at like plus 220. And then the Titans are going to be a long shot, obviously. But the Texans should be favorites to win that division. If they're anything over like plus 125, I'll absolutely bet that and parlay it with like Buffalo to win the AFC East or somebody else to win its division. The Chiefs to win the AFC West or whatever. Stroud is 11-1 for MVP, I saw on FanDuel, which is ridiculous. I think he should be more like 15-1. Like, kind of like where Jordan Love is. But everybody's hyping him up. I mean, and rightfully so. He was awesome. But his MVP odds are way too high. I don't think DeMeco will win Coach of the Year because everybody expects him to be good. But he'll be a candidate for it nonetheless. I want to know what Will Anderson for Defensive Player of the Year is going to be because he's going to be a stud. He was the Defensive Rookie of the Year. And I want to see what his odds are going to be for Defensive Player of the Year because he's a franchise cornerstone on the edge there. And then, say if they were to draft Jason Newton, I want to know what his odds would be for Defensive Rookie of the Year. Because that just seems like a logical draft fit with Newton and Texans. And then their win total, like we talked about in the last show with Green Bay, I expected to be like 9.5. And I would absolutely take the over. And I think the highest number of wins I could see them having is probably 12. So, if their win total is anything less than 10, I'd absolutely take the over with the Texans as of right now. But who knows? Things can change in the offseason. Guys can get injured and whatnot. But I'm just speculating on what some of these teams' odds are going to be for next season. So there you have it for the Houston Texans. Next up is going to be their division rival, the Indianapolis Colts.